Good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of the local review body of the 25th of June 2024. I can confirm that the meeting has been properly called and is correct. Can I first ask members to appoint a chair for the meeting, please? Councillor Dempster.
Good afternoon, Claire. Given that I intend to declare an interest in agenda item 5, in interest of continuity, I would suggest that Councillor Campbell assume the chair. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Drysdale, I can see you've got your hand up as well.
Yeah, good afternoon, members. Could I second that, please? Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Campbell, you've been proposed and seconded. Are you happy to accept?
Do I have any choice, Clerk? No, I'm happy to accept. Good afternoon, members, and welcome to this meeting of the local review body. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and the recording will be made available on the council website for public listening. Remote participants, please follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off your video when you're not addressing the meeting. Right, speak in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute, although I will look out for the virtual hand going up. No material should be posted in the chat function if it is intended as part of the discussion. The usual standing orders apply, including any votes will be undertaken by roll call. All members should speak clearly and directly into the microphone when making contributions, and when referring to reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone to follow. So if we move on to agenda item 2, which is the written apologies. Claire, can you provide the written apologies, please?
Of course, Chair. We've got 6 members present today. Apologies from Councillor Jordan. Other than yourself, all members are present on Teams. Those members present are Councillors Dashper, Dempster, Drysdale, McFarlane and Slater.
Thanks very much. I confirm my agreement to the participation of those members recorded as participating remotely. So we'll move on to agenda item 3, which is declarations of interest. Do any members have a declaration of interest they wish to make? Councillor Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. Yes. Agenda item number 5, land adjacent to Granny Sue's Yachts, closed Bunthorn Hill. The applicant's a friend of mine, and I did provide him with some guidance on how to proceed with an appeal to the local review body. So I feel under these circumstances I should not take part in the deliberation, and I will remove myself from the meeting when agenda item 5 comes up for discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dempster. Anyone else? Don't see any hands going up. Okay. I'll now ask Claire to take us through the local review body, through the documents and the papers for the meeting. Thanks, Claire.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I can confirm we've got 2 notices of review for the consideration at this meeting. First being item 4, Rounds Hill, Stranraer, refusal of planning permission for alterations to dwelling house, including formation of box dormer to north elevation to form second floor domestic accommodation. 23-24-87 full. In your papers you have the notice of review, report on handling, observations of the appointed officer, the planning application form, decision letter, relevant extracts from the Dumfries and Galway Local Development Plan 2 and National Planning Framework 4, and the photos of the application site on locality. Grounds of refusal are on the massing, scale and design of the box dormer proposed to the north elevation of the host dwelling would fail to preserve or enhance the character and appearance of the host dwelling and its immediate neighbourhood, and the associated external balcony would have a detrimental impact on the residential amenity of neighbouring properties, both of which are contrary to National Planning Framework 4, Policy 16, Quality Homes, Dumfries and Galway Council Local Development Plan 2, Policy H8, Alterations and Extensions to Dwellings and Supplementary Guidance, Alterations and Extensions to Dwellings. Requested method of determination is that the applicant is asked that the review be dealt with based on a review of the relevant information provided by the applicant and other parties only, without any further process. Grounds stated in the notice of review and further comments submitted by the agent are, in summary, every planning application should be considered on its own merit and should also be transparent throughout the region when making decisions, but clearly this has not been the case. Given its own individual merit, this planning application complies with LDP 2 Policy H8, Alterations and Extensions to Dwellings, and LDP 2 Supplementary Guidance on Alterations and Extensions to Dwellings, but for some reason the planning officer has not given consideration to the fact that more than 50% of the existing roof covering will remain on the north elevation. 2. There are no neighbour or public objections. There is no mention in the delegated report that more than 50% of the existing roof covering will remain in the north elevation, nor that it is set halfway up the roof covering and does not exceed the width of the dormer below. The amendments sought by the case officer were simply not feasible, as it was not possible to reduce the proposed ceiling height of 2.1 metres any further due to building regulation requirements and because insulation must be placed over the roof deck. The case officer fails to mention to the existing ground levels in the delegated report, as the two mentioned neighbouring properties sit significantly below the application site. It is unsure as to whether the case officer visited the site or not. With regard to the site levels, the existing first floor dormer looks above the said neighbouring properties as significantly lower. The proposed dormer would be set back and would not raise any issues with regard to overlooking. Many similar planning applications have been approved, such as a recent application to 20 Ryan View Crescent, Stranraer, reference number 230997 full. The case officer has not given any consideration to the fact that more than 50% of the existing roof covering will remain on the north elevation. Planning control must be consistent and fair with the judgment of an application's own individual merit. Unfortunately, for some reason or another, this has not been the case, and sincerely trust that the local review body members will agree with the reasoning set out and approve the application. You have the relevant development plan policies in your papers for LDP2, these are OP1, OP2, H8, and for supplementary guidance you have alterations and extensions to dwellings and design quality and placemaking. For National Planning Framework 4, you have policies 1, 2, 3, 14 and 16. Main issues for the local review body to consider are: does the proposal fail to comply with the terms of the development plan? In particular, does the proposal fail to accord with LDP 2 Policy H8, alterations and existing to dwellings, and the associated LDP 2 supplementary guidance, also alterations and extensions to dwellings? Does the proposal fail to accord with NPF 4 Policy 16 quality homes. More specifically, would the proposed dormer, by reason of its massing, scale and design, fail to preserve or enhance the character and appearance of the host dwelling house? Would the proposed dormer, by reason of massing, scaling and design, fail to preserve or enhance the character and appearance of the immediate neighbourhood? Would the proposed external balcony have a detrimental effect on the residential amenity of neighbouring properties? And if it is not considered that the proposal accords with the terms of the development plan, are there a set of material considerations of sufficient weight to justify a departure from the development plan? If so, on what grounds would such a decision be made? What reasons would members give for such a decision if it was considered that the proposal departs from the terms of the development plan? And if members are minded to reverse the appointed officer's decision and instead grant planning permission for this proposal, what set of conditions and reasons would members wish to see attached, if any? And if members are instead minded to vary the terms of the appointed officer's decision and make reference to the relevant determining development policies beyond those stated within the delegated report and decision notice, what changes to the specific reasoning for the decision would be required, and which additional policies, if any, would be referenced? So, having outlined the documents within your papers, it falls to the LRB to determine whether it has sufficient information to consider the review. It's confirmed that there will be no representations from any party here today. You have the following options. Decide if you have sufficient information for you to determine the review today. Request further information in the form of written representations. The LRB would be required to state precisely the information it was seeking and who must provide it. Resolve to hold a hearing, again specifying who would be invited to speak and on what matters. Resolve to hold a site visit, accompanied or unaccompanied, can be done in conjunction with any of the above, but would obviously not allow a decision to be made today. And if the local review body resolves it has sufficient information and that no further procedure is required, the local review body has full powers to uphold, reverse or vary a determination. The decision notice will include a statement of the terms in which the planning authority has decided the case reviewed. You have a planning advisor present at your meeting in relation to this case. It's confirmed that he has not had any involvement in this case prior to the submission of the notice of review and was not the case officer or the appointed officer for this application. He is here purely to provide independent advice as needed on matters of planning policy, law or process to the local review body. You also have a solicitor present here today, and she will act independently if the local review body require any specific advice on matters of law. So members are clear and no further clarification is required. I will ask the Chair now to lead the debate and in the first instance to lead you through the agenda papers together so you can decide if you have sufficient information before you to make a determination today.
Thanks very much, Claire. To go through the papers, I'll first probably ask the planning advisor to maybe just take us through some of the pictures so that we can look at those first of all, and then we'll go through the index of contents one by one, where members can ask questions or ask for clarification in any of the reports. I mean, we can always come back to some of the other ones if some of the members miss some of the index of context. But if I ask the planning advisor just to take us through the last part of the report first. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. I'm happy to do that. Just before I start the presentation, these replicate the photographs that are in your papers on pages 105 to 108. There's 8 images here. The majority of them were taken 13th of April 2022, and they've been provided to me rather by the case officer. I haven't visited this particular site or taken any pictures myself. So the first picture is a view from the street. It's taken from the entrance into Rowans Hill. And the second slide is another view from the street showing the entire front elevation of the property and the existing dormer to the right-hand roof slope. You can just see it there with the quite deep fascia and the kind of dark brown half-it on the right-hand side. So that is the existing dormer, just as a reference point. Your drawings, existing and proposed elevations are on pages 65 and 69 respectively in your papers. So photograph 3, even the west elevation of the dwelling house. So this is showing the existing dormer on the left-hand side. And that's from fairly close quarters within the garden area. The fourth picture is a view from the northwest looking towards the existing house, and you can see the existing box dormer on the roof plane there. The proposed box dormer that you see in your papers would be situated on the same roof plane as that one. And the proposed balcony would be formed from what is presently the roof of the existing dormer with the second dormer window behind, but that's fairly self-evident from your papers. So the fifth slide I've got is showing the north elevation of the existing dwelling house with the existing box dormer. And this is a ground level view from the application site, which is overlooking Ladorvan, if that's the correct pronunciation, looking eastwards. So that's one of the neighbouring dwelling houses. Your location plan and your block plans are both on page 61 of your papers. Seventh image I've got is a ground level view. This is over Colum, or is it Colan? I think it's Colan, the dwelling house and garden to the north. And then the ground level view of Torvig, which is situated to the northwest.
Thanks very much. Has any members got any questions they wish to ask on that report? Don't see any hands going up, so therefore I'll go through the index of contents. So the first one is the notice of review. This is on page 15 in the report. So if any members got any questions or queries or any clarification that they require in the notice of review. Don't see anyone wishing to come in. We'll go to the report on handling. This is determined under the delegated powers and related correspondence pages. It says here 133. Am I on the right one? Sorry. Apologies, members. Pages 29 to 43 is the report on handling. Any members got any questions, clarifications? Councillor Drysdale?
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, on page 32, the mass and scaling of the box dormer in reasons number 1 says that it will be detrimental impact on the residential amenity of the neighbouring properties, which are contrary to NPF Planning Framework for Policy 16. Is it all right for me just to ask the officer in attendance today if he could explain, is that because at that height it will actually look directly into the back gardens of one of the neighbouring properties? Are we able to ask that question? Thanks very much, Chair.
Yeah, happy to bring Robert in on that.
Thanks, Chairman. I'm just looking at the appointed officers report here, the delegated report. So at the bottom of page 31 of your papers at 4.8, it says, and it looks at the scale and the massing and general design of it in the paragraph above, but at 4.8 it then turns to looking at neighbours' privacy, residential amenity, where it's possible to look into gardens or windows that were previously largely private, and it then says, in this instance, the northern boundary of the garden bounds onto the rear gardens of 2 residential properties, Colam and Ladorvan, both on Leswalt High Road. It is noted that the existing dormer window already faces in this direction. However, given that a second floor balcony is being proposed where the floor level would sit approximately 5.3 metres above the ground, it's considered that this would give rise to an unacceptable loss of privacy to garden ground of these properties in this instance. So that then translates into that element of the decision notice. So that's kind of reasoning in paragraph 4.8 of the delegated report. Hope that helps, Chair.
Thanks. Has that been helpful, Councillor Drysdale?
That's very helpful. Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry about the background noise. We have an alarm going off here where I am, so sorry for that, but that's really helpful. Thanks very much.
Thanks. I don't think we heard any background noise. Councillor McFarlane?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for that, Robert. I did have an alternative question, but just on the back of Councillor Drysdale's, Councillor Drysdale's question, the fact that it's a balcony obviously would mean that rather than it just being above it, obviously they would have access onto that, which would mean that it would give them similar viewing from what they get in the one below, but obviously in an elevated provision, which would give them greater access. So I think that's where you come from with that. In relation to my question, it was on page 29, we're talking about it extending above the roof ridge. Do we have any guidelines on that as to what would be acceptable? Is it normal practice, or would that be detrimental or normally?
Thanks, Councillor McFarlane. I'll bring Robert in.
Thanks, Chair. The key policies and guidance in relation to this are set out in the delegated report. So you're looking at Local Development Plan 2 policy alterations and extensions to dwellings, which is H8. There's an associated adopted supplementary guidance to that, which is alterations and extensions to houses. Beyond that, you've got the MPF 4 policies, 14 design quality in place, and also quality homes. The other thing, obviously, which covers amenity amongst other general considerations, is LDP2 policy OP1. So when you look at the delegated report, and it does set out that those are the key issues, I don't think there is anything particular in relation to it being located above the ridgeline or not. There is reference in the report at 4.5 as to what policy H8 states, so that alterations and extensions to dwellings will be supported where the massing, scale, design and external materials are sympathetic to the scale and character of the existing dwelling house and its immediate neighbourhood, such that they comply with the design guidance set out in the supplementary guidance document. What it then says below at 4.6 is in relation to dormer windows, it says dormer extensions should be designed so that their size and design is proportionate with the roof of the existing building. Box dormers constructed using the full width and or height of the roof will not be permitted due to their bulky appearance. It says dormer windows should be set within the roof and not extend to the extremities. That is, they should be positioned significantly below the ridgeline. So that has come from the supplementary guidance document, and that's the part I'm looking at in the report in relation to the ridgeline. So the advice there in the supplementary guidance is it should be positioned significantly below the ridgeline, but ultimately it's a judgment call when you look at what the policy says.
Thanks, Robert. Has that been helpful, Councillor McFarlane?
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. If there's no more questions in 2, we'll move on to 3, which is observations of the appointed officers. These are on pages 49 to 51. Is that Councillor Dempster? Hand up.
Aye, apologies for being slow, Chairman. No, just a question on 4.7, where it says, in this instance, second floor accommodation may be formed by the construction of a box dormer where the roof would sit above the roof ridge of the host dwelling house, which in itself does not comply with current policy. Is that the proposed box dormer we're talking about? Or is that the dormer that's in place at the moment? And I realise we're talking about current policy as opposed to the policy that might have been in place when the box dormer was introduced onto the roof. I just wondered which was which with that, Robert. It seems a bit unusual in its language. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dempster. Robert?
Thanks, Chair. The way I'm reading it at the start of paragraph 4.7 is that the second floor accommodation would be formed by the construction of the additional box dormer. So that's the new element where the roof would sit above the roof ridge of the existing dwelling house, and the view of the appointed officers, that doesn't comply with the present policy.
Too fine, Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dempster. So we're on 3 now, the observations of the appointed officer on the applicant's agent's notice of review, pages 49 to 51. Anyone got any questions or clarifications? Don't see anyone coming in. We now move on to 4, which is the planning application form submitted on the 17th of November 2023, supporting information, pages 55 to 69. Anyone got any questions, clarifications required? Don't see anyone coming in. We now move on to number 5, which is the decision letter from Dumfries and Galloway Council dated on the 31st of January 2024. These are on pages 73 to 78. Anyone wishing to ask any questions? Don't see anyone coming in. Okay, we'll move on to 6, which is the relevant extracts from the Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2 and the National Planning Framework 4. These are on pages 81 to 101. Anyone wishing to question or for clarification? I don't see anyone coming in. And number 7, well, we've already been through the photos of the application site and the locality pages on 105 and 108 at the beginning. So, members, do we think we've got sufficient enough information to make a determination today? Councillor McFarlane?
Yes, Chair, I feel we do have sufficient information. One question just to Robert before we do though is, should we take the lack of objection from the neighbours as acceptance of the fact that they would have that element of their privacy interrupted, or, you know, is it significant?
Yeah, I'll bring Robert in.
I think it carries some positive weight for the proposal in the sense that you don't have shared concerns from neighbours, but at the same time, when the case officer is looking at the application and the appointed officer is making a decision on it, then they've got to look at what the council policy says in relation to residential amenity, and they have to take that into account even if the neighbour is unconcerned about it. So, you know, part of the decision is made on that basis. So, yeah, the officer's forced to make a decision in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise, and in this case they feel it's contrary to the relevant parts of the development plan, and they don't think that the lack of objection carries much weight.
Appreciate that, thank you, because obviously houses do change hands. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Dempster?
Thanks, Chairman. No, just to second what Councillor McFarlane proposed, that we have enough information to determine this application today. And just as a throwaway line, we're always reminded the house will be there for much longer often than the current tenants, and it's about policy rather than whether or no individuals locally object. But no, I'm happy with the information I have and would be content to proceed in that vein. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. So it's open up to members where we want to take this one. Anyone want to come in and lead? Councillor McFarlane?
Yeah, having read through the papers, I noticed that the applicant's architect has tried to muddy the waters a little bit by putting in a couple of alternatives where there have been dormers that have been accepted but clearly have been under alternative policies, and as a consequence have been passed and wouldn't be passed today. I think the officer's been very diligent, and I think we should go with the recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So, Councillor Dempster?
I'll go with that, Chairman. Other than the fact that it's not the officer's recommendation, we're supporting the decision by the officer rather than the officer making a recommendation. It's a decision the officer made, and I would certainly support that decision given the information we have before us today. Thank you.
So, you're asking to uphold the decision, is that correct, Jim?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. I did see Councillor Dashper's hand going up. I don't know if you wanted to come in, Councillor Dashper.
Yeah, it was just to second Councillor McFarlane, but third it, I guess, after Councillor Dempster. Cheers.
So, so far, there's been a suggestion to uphold the, or a motion to uphold the officer's decision. Are there any alternatives? I don't see anyone coming in on that. So, Claire, do you want to just remind the LRB what the decision was?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I can confirm that the local review body have agreed to uphold the decision of the appointed officer and refuse the application for the same grounds as stated in the papers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, members. We'll now move on to... No, you can't address the meeting. No, you can't. No, I'm sorry, you can't address the meeting. Yeah, but you can't address the meeting, sorry.
Can you not hear? Okay. So have you got difficulty hearing in that corner? Is that what the issue is? We just...
Apologies, members. At the moment, we've got two members of the public who had difficulty hearing the debate, so they've been asked to move forward and closer to the top table. And thanks very much, Councillor Dempster. You'll be leaving for the next item. Is that correct?
I am indeed, Chairman. I shall leave. I would ask maybe that you or Claire give me a call, a telephone call for the Swestrans meeting, because I should really leave the meeting in its entirety. So if either of you could give me a call just prior to the Swestrans meeting commencing, I'd be grateful.
Yeah, thanks very much. In conclusion of this, well, it's meant to be 3:30, isn't it? So we've got a time there, Jim, 3:30. I don't know how long the LRB will take, but 3:30. If the LRB goes on longer, then it'll be on the conclusion of this. Thanks, Jim.
Very good. Thanks for that, Chairman. Cheers, folks. Thank you.
Okay, we now proceed to the second item 5. Could you take us through the report, please, Claire?
Okay, thank you. Item 5, land adjacent to Granny's House, Shorts, Close Burn, Thornhill, refusal of planning permission in principle for erection of dwelling house, 23/14/33 PIP. And so index of contents, notice of review, report and handling, observations of the appointed officer, planning application form, decision letter, relevant extracts from Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2, National Planning Framework 4, and you have photos of application site and locality. Grounds of refusal are the proposal is contrary to Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2, Policy H3 on housing in the countryside, the related supplementary guidance and National Planning Framework 4, Policy 17, which permit the erection of new houses in the countryside only in special circumstances, and none of these circumstances apply in this case. Specifically, the proposal would not be well related to a small building group in that it would comprise a form of urban development northwards along the U486N public road which would not enhance or consolidate the form, character, appearance or landscape setting of Shotts Park small building group. Requested method of determination. The applicant has asked that the review be dealt with based on a review of the relevant information provided by the applicant and other parties only, without any further process. Grounds stated in the notice of review are in summary. The appellant accepts the appointed officer's view that the determining issue is the principle of development, but disagrees with the reasoning and conclusion. The appellant challenges the reason for refusal, in particular the extent to which the delegate report adequately assesses all relevant policy considerations along with the case history. It is accepted that the application site in question is within a small building group. This referred to within the supplementary guidance as Shotts Park, comprising the area combining both Shotts and Park as an entity. It is this clearly identifiable nucleus that provides that the area combining both Shotts and Park as an entity. It is this clearly, I think there's a bit of repetition here. It's clearly identifying nucleus that provides the visual cohesion and also capable of being viewed as a group in a landscape setting. The case officer makes particular reference to the small building group of Shotts, restricting this in a form of linear development to the south of the application site and centering on an identifiable traditional terrace of housing associated with Granny's house. The appellant disputes that this does not cover the entire extent of Shotts Park, indeed the northern extent of the small building group at Shotts Wood. The entire building group extends beyond this and does not include the development to the north from Mill House and should be considered in the overall pattern of development and landscape character of the small building group. Indeed, Mill Cottage itself was built over the top of Mill Lade, quite close to Shotts Blacksmith and Shotts Joinery Workshops, and historically it is this cottage which has more historical reference to what should be seen as the nucleus of the Shotts small building group. Reference by the case officer is also made to there be no further development on the eastern side of the U486N to the north, with the exception of a small area of hand standing. This, however, cannot be discounted as such. The area referred to is development and comprises an area of development associated with Mill House, which contains structures and hard standing. It is very much part of the dwelling and not rural greenfield setting. Beyond this hard standing and also related to the site and the setting is an area referenced by the case officer to a cluster of mature trees to the northeast of the proposal site. This area is mature landscaping directly to the north of the site and comprises mature trees along with natural raising of the ground as the road turns the corner to the remaining development within Shotts Park small building group to the north. In terms of the supplementary guidance on criteria for small building groups, this in terms of slope, landscape character, bend to road and development all create a natural boundary and definition to the small building group. It is not accepted that this does not constitute infill development or that the proposal cannot be considered as a rounding off opportunity. It is clear this proposal is not simply a form of ribbon development adding a further house to an existing row of houses, but represents an infill within an area located directly within a small building group which has natural definition by development to the south and setting within local landscape, natural landscape by raised ground and mature trees to the north. In addition, the development to the south associated with Granny's house forms a linear arrangement of dwellings which face onto the road. The road then turns to form a straight section with the development of Mill House before this turns further into another bend in the road with development of housing beyond Mill House. The straight section of road provides a natural infill site to face onto road in the same pattern. NPF Policy 16 seeks to encourage, promote and facilitate the delivery of high quality, affordable and sustainable homes in the right locations as with local policy. This does not justify residential development in the countryside at any location or any cost. Development must be appropriate to the character of the area, protect and enhance environmental quality, protect or enhance the historical environment and make a positive contribution to placemaking. This site complies with this policy. The original application documents included a compliant energy statement in accordance with supplementary guidance, and this remains on the list of documents on the authority's planning portal. As an infill development within the small building group with natural definition to the north and south of the application site, this proposal remains consistent both under current policy as well as the policy at the time of approval originally in 2006. Whilst the delegated report notes that the planning history of the site is a material consideration, it does not make reference to the supplementary planning guidance number 3.2 for small building groups Nestdale dated January 2010. This included a list of suitable small building groups which included Shotts Park, and extract of which is attached to the statement. The guidance at this time also included maps identifying potential development sites, and the Shotts Park map is attached to the statement which clearly identifies the site of this application being identified as a suitable site for development. Whilst local and national policy has changed, the general requirements within the supplementary guidance associated with small building groups remains largely consistent with this earlier guidance, and further extract of this guidance is also attached for reference to the statement. It should therefore not simply be the case, as suggested within the report of handling, that this application site was contrary to policy, or suggested that previous approvals were only made by committee and contrary to officer's recommendation. But the site clearly was accepted by the planning authority and incorporated within the policy as part of the supplementary guidance to the Nestdale local plan, and therefore deemed acceptable for development. If all the relevant development plan policies in your papers, from LDP2 you've got OP1, OP2, ED10, H3, NE2, IN9 and T2. Supplementary guidance you have design quality and placemaking, housing in the countryside, small building group list March 2023, small building group assessment flowchart, sustainability reducing carbon emissions in buildings, and dark sky friendly lighting. From National Planning Framework 4 you have policies 1, 2, 3, 4, 12, 14, 16, 17, 18 and 29. So the main issues for the local review body to consider: does the proposal fail to comply with the terms of the development plan? In particular, does the proposal fail to comply with LDP2 policy H3 housing in the countryside and the associated LDP2 supplementary guidance housing in the countryside? Does the proposal fail to comply with NPF4 policy 14 rural homes? Specifically, would the proposed development not be well related to the identified Shotts Park small building group? Would the proposed development comprise a form of urban development? Would the proposed development fail to enhance or consolidate the form, character, appearance and landscape setting of the small building group? And if it is not considered that the proposal If it is not considered that the proposal does not accord with the terms of the development plan, are there a set of material considerations of sufficient weight to justify a departure from the terms of the development plan? If so, on what grounds would such a decision be made? What reasons would members give for such a decision if it was considered that the proposal departs from the terms of the development plan? And if members are minded to reverse the appointed officer's decision and instead grant planning permission for this proposal, what set of conditions and reasons would members wish to see attached, if attached. Sorry. The members are minded to vary the terms of the appointed officer's decision and make reference to relevant determining development policies beyond those stated within the delegated report and decision notice, what changes to the specific reasoning for the decision would be required, and which additional policies, if any, would be referenced. So, having outlined your documents within your papers, it now falls to the LRB to determine whether it has sufficient information to consider the review. Again, it's confirmed there will be no representations from any party heard today, and you have the same options available to you as outlined previously. You can decide you have sufficient information before you to determine the review today. Request further written information in the form of written representations. You would need to state precisely who would be providing the information and what information you were seeking. Resolve to hold a hearing, again specifying who would be invited to speak and on what matters. Resolve to hold a site visit, accompanied or unaccompanied, which could be done in conjunction with any of the above, but would not allow a decision to be made today. And if the local review body resolves it has sufficient information and that no further procedure is required, then you have the full powers to uphold, reverse or vary a determination. The decision notice would include a statement of the terms in which the planning authority has decided the case reviewed. And again, if you have a planning advisor present at your meeting for this case, again it's confirmed he has not had any involvement in this case prior to submission of the notice of review and was not the case officer or the appointed officer here purely to provide independent advice as needed on matters of planning, policy, law or process to the LRB. And again, you have a solicitor present who will act independently if required on any specific advice matters of the law. So members are clear, no further clarification is required. I'll again ask the Chair to lead the debate in the first instance, lead the local review body through the agenda papers together to decide if you have sufficient information before you to make the determination today.
Thanks, Claire. Members, we'll just go through the same procedure. I'll ask the planning advisor, Mr Duncan, to take us through the report, particularly the photographs at the end, and then we'll go through the index of contents, and members can ask questions as we go through the papers. Mr Duncan.
Thanks, Chair. Just for the avoidance of doubt, I've got 4 pictures which have been supplied by the appointed officer for the case here. Now, these replicate the photographs that are in your papers on pages 217 and 218, and they were taken, well, the case officer pictures were taken on 21st of November 2023. So the first view is showing the southern boundary of the application site, and this is viewed from the U486N public road. Now, as a reference point, you've got your location plan on page 171 and your block plan on page 173. Now, if you're looking at the block plan, please note that the proposals there are indicative only, because this is an application for planning permission in principle. Second view, it's a very similar viewpoint. This is from Google Street View. It's taken during the winter time. And it's basically allowing the linear development at Granny's House to be seen. So that's the element on the left-hand side. Third view is from the case officer. This is again showing the application site frontage along the U486N, but this is looking north rather than kind of southwest. The application site's on the left here of this road. And the final image I've been given is showing the northern boundary of the site, just at the far end there, with the cluster of mature trees in the background, and the area of hard standing to the north of the site, where you can see the 2 vehicles there in the middle ground. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much. Any members got any questions? Who's that? Councillor Slater.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask Robert, the area looks very low, and is it liable to flooding at all in that area?
Robert?
I don't think it's identified as flood risk. I can't really see any reference to that in the delegated report. No, I don't think it is. By virtue of its omission from the report, I don't think it is prone to flooding, no.
Has that been helpful, David? Councillor Slater, you still got your hand up. Are you satisfied?
Sorry, I'm satisfied with that, but I'd like to ask another question regarding the trees on the left-hand side, I think it is. Are they in the planning application or not? Thank you.
Is it in relevance to the photographs that we've just been seeing?
Yes, it is, yes, thank you.
Okay. Robert?
Thanks, Chair. What you've got in front of you today, it's an application for planning permission in principle. So that's to establish whether the use of the land proposed is acceptable. The proposals for the erection of a single dwelling house. So I think it's important to explain that matters of detail are not in front of you at this point in time. It's just the broad principle. So in relation to the trees, yes, it's a legitimate question, but at this point in time, you're not looking at potential impacts to the trees. You're just considering the principle of a single dwelling house at this site. There may be a later application which shows some detail in relation to that tree, depending on what decision you take today, but that's not something for you to consider for today, Chair. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Slater. Councillor Drysdale.
Thanks very much, Chair. Through yourself, I don't know whether I need to mention this later when we go through the specific points, because later in the papers we see a little bit more information on the proposals, albeit I understand that it's planning in principle, so we can't take those as absolutely finalised, obviously. But could I just, through yourself, ask Robert, with regards to the ribbon development, the reasons for this being refused, one of them is that it's not well related to a small building group, although we don't obviously see the size of it at the moment, but it would compromise a form of ribbon development on the public road. I'm just from the diagrams later, so perhaps I need to ask this question later, Chair, so I don't want to be jumping in too soon. But when we look at the plans, obviously I haven't done a site visit, I haven't been to Closeburn, that's where it is that right? It's hard for me to see that it's so linear, because when you look later on, it looks to be quite curved and more rounded off, shall we say. Is it, in my eyes, the ribbon development, yes, close to a road, but also more linear. So I don't know, Robert, if you're able to give me a little bit more information of that, because it looks a bit rounded off at either side. And it's more of an infill space, but could you just give me some clarification on that? Thanks, Chair.
I'll probably come back to you on that, because if you're looking at the drawing on page 173, and that's as we go through the index of context, when we get to that particular item, maybe that's the best time for Robert to give you an answer on that one. We're just trying to get through the photographs at the moment.
Sure.
And then
Understood.
Once we get to that particular item, you can come back in. Is that okay, Councillor Drysdale?
That's absolutely understandable and very well explained. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much. Okay, if there's no more questions on the photographs, we'll go through the index of contents, which is one notice of review date dated 29th of March 2024. These are on pages 115 to 130. Do any members have any points they wish clarified or any questions? Councillor McFarlane.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. One for Robert. I've seen the planning history in 2005. The 1.5 story was refused, and then in 2005 again, there was one approved by Nithsdale Area Regulatory Committee. I have been aware that previously we have granted planning permission, but there's a time limit of about 3 years before it expires. Is that the case here? Is the one in 2005, second one that was approved, has that expired, and is that why we're having the new application? Thanks.
What page reference are you on, Councillor McFarlane?
Page 123, planning history. It's Robert Potter that's put it in.
Thanks very much, Robert.
Thanks, Chair. There's also, if you look at page 134 of your papers, there's also at paragraph 1.5, the planning history that the case officers put together in the report on handling. Yes, there were 2 applications back in 2005 that you can see there. 05P3513 was refused on the grounds stated. There was then a second application, 05P30828, which went to the Nithsdale Area Regulatory Committee, which was the predecessor to the Council's Planning Applications Committee for determination of planning applications. Now, following a site visit, the members of that committee were minded to approve the application, but at that point in time there was a 2-tier committee system, in the sense that if a local area committee, and there were 4 at that time, were minded to depart from policy, then it had to go to the Planning and Environment Committee as well, which was the predecessor to the Environment and Resources, or Economy and Environment Committee, I think it will be now. And then the members would make decisions there that were strategic. So that's what happened in this case. The Nithsdale Area Regulatory Committee members were minded to support it. It went to Planning and Environment Committee, and the decision was that the application was granted permission subject to a Section 75 obligation. And that tied the land, the small holding, if you like, to the proposed dwelling house. You'll also see at the foot of the page 134, there was a later application 09P30437, which basically renewed the earlier planning permission because nothing had changed. The policy and circumstances of the case were the same. So there was no reason to revisit that decision, and that was granted subject to conditions on 15th of September 2009. After that point, the trail goes cold, and as Councillor McFarlane has pointed out, there's no what's known as extant planning permission upon which they can rely at the moment in relation to that site. Yes, there's a planning history to it, and yes, that carries some weight, but there isn't actually an extant planning permission that can be used at the moment. And the application is obviously seeking permission in principle for a single dwelling house at this site.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor McFarlane. Any more questions on number 1, notice of review? If not, we'll move to number 2, which is the report on handling, determined under delegated powers. This is on pages 133 to 148. Any questions on that? Don't see anyone wishing to come in. Now move on to 3. Observations of appointed officer on the applicant's agent's notice of review. These are on pages 151 to 153. Any questions on that? Don't see anyone wishing to come in. Now go to 4, which is the planning application form submitted on the 7th of July 2023. These are on pages 157 and 173. Any questions on that? Councillor Drysdale.
Oh, yes, thanks, Chair. It was just to come back in on that, Robert. So we see the supporting statement from the applicant on 165, and they've stated that, you know, could it be considered that it's an infill site? I'm not sure in Scotland what the rules are on the meterage, whereby you can look at infill areas of small building groups. And then obviously the applicant stating on the supporting statement that in LDP2 it would be considered compatible with the intent of NPF4, whereby if it came forward to the council a suitable proposal that was to scale and in keeping with the character, it could be applicable to NPF policy 17. So it was just really to get your feedback on that and whether or not it could be looked at as an infill. And then back to my second question, Chair, through yourself. In my eyes, just look at, obviously I've not had a site visit, and at this point in time I'm not suggesting one, but to me, the way the road curves around, yes, there is a fair frontage at this side of the road on the whole scale, but it does to me curve round, and it seems to have, in my view, a rounded off area at the start and the end. But again, I would take Robert's opinion on that because he's qualified and I'm not. So if I could have those two questions answered, that would be great. Or your opinion, Robert. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Drysdale. I'll get Robert to try and assist you on that.
Thanks, Chair. When I look at the report and handling, the principle of the development is the key element of what's under consideration here. So the case officer set out at 4.4 the generality, which is positive, of MPF 4 Policy 17 in rural homes. The slight difficulty with MPF 4 Policy 17, it does support proposals for new houses in rural areas where the development is suitably scaled, sited and designed to be in keeping with the character of the area and the development. So that's a necessary precursor to all houses in the countryside. It then follows that up by saying one is on a site allocated for housing within the LDP. Now, LDP 2 Policy H3 is a criteria-based policy. It's not actually allocating sites for housing in the countryside. It's setting out a list of criteria which need to be met for them to be considered acceptable in principle. However, in applying MPF 4 in relation to LDP 2, it's accepted that a site within a small building group, a proposal like this within a small building group, which is within or well related to one, should be supported as being in accordance with the development plan for the purposes of MPF 4 Policy 17. When you look at paragraph 4.6 in the report, it does point out that just because it's in a small building group on the list doesn't mean the development proposals will be considered to be acceptable. And then it sets out the criteria there of what a small building group has to contain. And then you then look at 4.7, it looks a bit about sense of place and things like that, physical characteristics of a place, local landscape character and so on and so forth. And then 4.8 really is the critical part because that sets out, and 4.9 it sets out why the case officer doesn't think it complies with the development plan. So it explains why they think it's an extension of a linear pattern of development in relation to the small building group of shots, which they see as forming a band of linear development to the south of the application site, and that the northern extent of that small building group is at Shotswood and Granny's House. So they think the site is located on the open edge of the Shotts Park small building group, and that it doesn't constitute infill development because there's no residential development on the western side of that road as it goes north from Granny's House on that kind of terrace there. So it's also considered on that basis to be driven development out with the natural parameters of the group. So it's not really an infill, if you like, between two houses as such. It's an infill between existing houses on an open area of field, and then you've got woodland beyond that. So that seems to be the rationale that's set out in the report as to why the appointed officer doesn't view the proposal as acceptable. I don't know if that helps, Chair, but that's certainly what I'm drawing from the information in front of me.
Thanks, Robert. I hope that's been helpful, Councillor Drysdale. I mean, obviously, you can revisit this later. Do you want to come back in, Councillor Drysdale? Your hand's up.
Oh yes, I've put my hand up again. Thank you, Chair. So at a later a later stage in the discussion, because this is planning in principle, so we don't really know what the applicant will finally come forward with if it were to go through today. Can we talk later about infill and small building groups? Would that come later, Chair, if you could advise me? Thanks.
I'm sure the planning advisor will give you that advice later on if you so wish to help with your determination. But we're not quite at that stage yet, Pauline.
Totally understand. Thanks, Chair.
Are there any other members on number 4, planning application form submitted? If not, we'll move on to 5, which is the decision letter from Dumfries and Galloway Council, dated 5th of February 2024. These are on pages 177 to 181. Any questions on that? Don't see any hands going up. Move on to 6, which is the relevant extracts from the Police and Galloway Local Development Plan 2 and the National Planning Framework 4. These are on pages 185 to 213. Any questions on that? Don't see any hands going up. And number 7, we've obviously seen the photographs at the beginning with Robert's report. So if there's no more questions on that, have we got sufficient enough information to make a determination today, members? Councillor McFarlane?
Yeah, I believe it is, Chair.
Thank you. I don't see any dissent. Councillor Slater?
Yes, I would agree with Councillor McFarlane on that. Thank you.
Okay, members, you've got the report in front of you, and I'll open it up. Anyone want to lead on this? Councillor Drysdale, yeah, you did want to come back in on certain points. Do you wish to do that now?
Yes, thank you so much. Just to go back to my points earlier about infill. So through yourself, Chair, I'd like to ask Robert, if this, I take it in LRB, local review body meetings, we can't, I think my understanding is we can't put conditions forward. That's my first question. Could I ask if that is correct, that we can't put conditions? Because in my view, I think it would be suitable as an infill if it was seen as a small building group, i.e. not such a large house. But of course, we don't really know what's going to come forward. So it was just really your opinions and advice on that to us as a committee. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Robert.
Thanks, Councillor Drysdale. I'll get Robert to advise members.
Chair, it would be legitimate to put conditions on the application if you were minded to support it and you felt the conditions were necessary and met the 6 tests set out in Circular 4 of 1998. I'd be happy to advise on that as well. I mean, it's a permission principle, so you would have a time condition which requires submission of details within 3 years and following approval of those details, implementation within 2 years. You normally set out conditions which are known as reserved matters. So you're basically setting out matters of detail which would require to be addressed in subsequent applications for approval of matters specified in conditions. So they would include things like design, siting, massing, scale, finishes, car parking access requirements, drainage requirements, landscaping, etc., etc. So there are a whole range of details which you can require to be the subject of the next application. The other thing as well is if you have a particular feeling for where you would want a footprint of a building to be located or what its particular design would look like. For example, if you felt it had to be single storey or no more than a storey and a half, or you felt it had to be in a particular position to accord with the characteristics of the group and you felt that was a reasonable and necessary condition, you could also impose that too. So no, if you're minded to overturn the decision today, then I would actually recommend that you certainly would need to think about putting conditions on this case. And again, I'm happy to advise in that regard, Chair.
Thank you very much. I hope that's been helpful, Councillor Drysdale.
It has indeed. Thanks, Chair. Very helpful. Thanks, Robert.
So back to members. Councillor McFarlane.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think following the conversation that we've had and Robert's explanations in relation to infill sites and urban development, etc., I think we go with the officer recommendations. Thank you.
We're not actually going with the officer's recommendation, so is your motion to uphold the decision?
Yes, it is. I keep getting my terminology wrong. Please forgive me.
It's easy done. I used to do it myself. So that's your motion being put forward. I would happy to support that. I looked at the case officer's report, the appointed officer's report, and everything that aligns to this, that I think the decision was the right decision, and I'd be happy to support to uphold that decision. So, is there anyone with an alternative view? Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would be minded to put an amendment in that we go against the officer recommendation, but I would be keen to hear the views of other members. I totally accept the two views that have been put forward, but I'd quite like Robert to expand a bit on what he has already alluded to with regards to the design, siting and massing and scale, which I think is really important in this particular case, because I think it has got to really mirror what's already in this village to meet the policies that are in place in LDP 3 and MPF 4. So I would be quite keen to hear what sort of things we could condition if we were able to do that. So if we could be advised on that, and obviously I'd have to see if I've got support of any other members, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to allow Robert to come in, but this is a planning in principle, so we don't really know what the design, the scale is going to be at this moment in time. But Robert, if you can assist.
Initial thoughts, dealing with a case like this, if you were looking, for example, as you've outlined, that you're acceptable with the principle of this development, you then look around at the context of the site and you try and establish if there is anything there that should be replicated at this location in terms of the actual detail that would make it harmonise a lot better. Something you feel that is essential, because conditions need to be necessary. So it's something that has to have a logic behind it. So in that regard, and looking at the houses round about, I would maybe suggest that you want to limit the mass and scale of the dwelling house to no more than 1.5 stories, and that would possibly make it in keeping with what's round about. I think that would be a reasonably safe condition. I think another safe condition would be if you have strong feelings about where the house should be located within the application site. It is quite large, when you look at the red line, then you could stipulate an area, for example, 10 metres setback from the edge of the road along the length of the application site within which the dwelling house would require to be located, and that would basically try and keep the house in character with what's there. But beyond that, I don't think that there's really any conditions that would be required. But I mean, there is obviously a policy requirement for detail as well as principle, so your policies would cover the consideration of any further cases as well. It's not like they can do anything once they've got permission in principle. The detail's subject of assessment too, but initial thoughts are maybe the kind of two type of conditions you want to consider in addition to the normal ones for outline permissions seeking additional detail. There's also the roads conditions as well. Now, the Council's Roads Planning Team Leader consultation responses on pages 147 to 148 of your papers. So just looking at that as well, if I just scroll down to it, there's quite a few conditions recommended there, and they're coded, so I can translate that just now if you want, basically. So C103 is requiring the provision of a lay-by from the public road to access the site, and the lay-by is 9 metres long along the back with a gradient of 1 in 40, so that's 2.5% away from the public road so that the water drains away. There's a requirement that the access from the back of that lay-by is 3.5 metres wide. There's a requirement, condition 3, C104, surface waters trapped and drained where it joins the public road so that water doesn't overflow onto the public road or dirt or anything like that. C115 is in relation to access gradients, so the access for the first 5 metres from the public road will be no more than 1 in 8, which is a 12.5% gradient, and then you're on to visibility splays. So looking at the access in both directions, that would be in a setback of 2.4 metres from the public road edge and measuring 43 metres in either direction. So those are imaginary triangles, if you like, that would be kept clear from obstruction for the lifetime of the development. And that is what the next condition would cover. It's just making clear you can't place obstructions in those areas. The other thing is requiring the vehicle access to be surfaced prior to completion of the dwelling house for the first 5 metres of the access of the public road. And the final one is just basically reiterating that in terms of parking and turning, you would need parking provision and turning suitable for the size of dwelling house within the site. The other two things are just advisory directives that would be added. So when you add all that together, you're probably looking at 15 or so conditions.
Thanks very much. Councillor Drysdale, although you were waiting to hear other members, I see you got your hand up. So are you putting in an amendment?
Yes, please, Chair. I would like to put in an amendment with all of those conditions, including those presented by Robert through the Roads and Infrastructure team. The fact that the house should sit at least 10 metres back, and we should limit the mass and scale to no more than 1.5 storeys. And a final condition, if it was possible, but it may not be possible at this stage, is to ensure that the roofing and external surfaces used were similar to that in the village itself, so that it doesn't look to be something that's too out of the ordinary. But again, I don't think we can propose that as a condition at this stage. That would come later down the line and be subject to the planning department's decisions at that time and their advice. But yes, I would like to put in an amendment that we go against officers' recommendations in this case. Thanks very much, Chair.
And you don't have a seconder at this moment in time. You want to come back in, Councillor Drysdale?
Sorry, Chair. I'm trying to lower my hand and it keeps going back up again. I was just waiting to see if anyone else was going to be willing to second me on that. But thank you. I'll try and lower my hand. Thanks.
Thanks very much. We do have a motion by Councillor McFarlane, seconded by myself. Your amendment has not got a seconder as yet. So unless you get a seconder, I think the decision probably will be to uphold the officer's decision. So I don't see anyone coming in to second you, Councillor Drysdale. I'll just give it a moment, but no. There's nobody coming in, so I think your amendment will fall. I think you can have your dissent recorded if you wish. It's entirely up to yourself.
Yes, I'll just have my dissent recorded. That's great. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thanks very much. So, Claire, can you just take us through the decision by the board?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I can confirm that the local review body have agreed to uphold the decision of the appointed officer and refuse the planning permission in principle for the same reasons as stated in the report.
Thank you very much. So thank you, members. I don't have any other business. So thanks for your attendance today, and thanks everyone else.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Robert. Bye.